This is Back for Our Future, the show that goes back to look ahead. We've said that about 1 billion times now. This is a 90s music and movie. Should say a 90s movie and sometimes music podcast where Tony and I are basically recanting our entire lives starting in 1993. If you go back to the early episodes, you might hear a little recant from 1992. But we're starting in 93 and we're going to keep going until we can go no more. This may be the longest running podcast in history, right?
I mean,
Also,
we do our best to keep it as long running as possible.
Absolutely fact. And also, Tony and I both believe in dragons. That's a political joke that'll circle back later. Anyway, great show lined up for us today. Tony, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. You know, we got a lot more listeners out there right now, so that's kind of a cool thing. And I know there's a lot of new listeners. So, again, if you are listening for the first time and you could be so kind to hit the subscribe button and maybe give us a little rating and review love, that would be really, really helpful to us as well. So I appreciate that. And of course, you probably have already found our Facebook page at this point. And if you have, we appreciate that. Otherwise, like us on Facebook as well.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of fun stuff that shows up in there when we uncover memories, or even fans. If fans have great memories and they want to share them, like for us, it's all about capturing that history. We're just the vessel. As we've always said, we're using our stories to help inspire maybe memories of your own. If you're just now listening for the first time, Tony has maybe arguably one of the world's best memories. I have one of the world's worst memories. So together we have half a memory. So it's pretty good.
Exactly. Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. All right, well, let's dive on in here. So here we are. It's November 1993, and there's a lot of movies that are going to stack up here on November 5th. I'm gonna play a little game as we go through these. We'll do them in order as we normally do, but I'm gonna see if you can figure out which one of these movies ends up being my favorite of this, and it'll be an interesting discussion. All right, so here we are, November 5th, 1993. First movie up, I don't remember it at all. It's a film called Flesh and Bone. You're going to have to tell me what this movie is because I have no idea.
So this was it's a really actually kind of a cool neo-noir mystery thriller. It is kind of a slow plotting build, but it does have Dennis Quaid, Meg Ryan, James Caan, and a young Gwyneth Paltrow. Movie didn't do particularly great, but kind of a cool premise to it, which is a man and a boy go into a house to rob this house. He kills the parents and asks the boy if there's anybody else in the house, and he reluctantly nods, and then he goes up and kills another little kid, and then leaves their crying baby alive. Eventually, the crying baby will be played by Meg Ryan, and then like Dennis Quaid is the boy, all grown up, and so they get into kind of a relationship, and the guy who had originally went into the house was James Caan. So there's this whole thing that meshes throughout the rest of the movie. It's a cool movie. I actually really enjoyed it, but again, there's a slow build in the films. Some people liked it, some people didn't. I vividly remember, and we're gonna get this is like a guy that he's been a character on our show throughout. My buddy Richard, of course. I vividly remember him telling me when this came out that his parents hated this movie. I vividly remember him doing that, so he'll remember it now probably as well. But his parents did not like this movie.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. The plot alone is disturbing as all get. That is one of the most disturbing plots.
I mean, the start of this movie is pretty disturbing because it's all at that house right away, and so it's kind of a disturbing, kind of a one false move ish type start to the movie. So I mean, I always kind of felt like it was pretty disturbing, and I always felt like One False Move was very disturbing as well.
Of course. Yeah. So I've never seen it, so I can't comment on it. I may go look at it just to see. I do tend to, for new listeners, we have a Tony's list that we may or may not get to in this episode, but a lot of times we have a Tony's list, and his list has been really good, especially because a lot of times when I go to the gym, I turn on the movies that I may not want to watch all the way at home, and I watch them in parts at the gym and see how far I can get, right, to recap stuff. Jack the Bear was as a prime example. That's one of Tony's picks. I had forgotten about that movie, and my God, it may have slowly entered into my permanent top 10. It's such a great film.
Such a great movie.
Such a great movie. Point being, Flesh and Bone, don't remember it. I would be curious to see young Gwyneth Paltrow because she's obviously aged very well as an actor in terms of her talent. I'm not just talking about looks here. But in terms of her talent, so I'd be kind of curious to see her in the beginning. And that's one of my favorite things about this is when we find these movies where you have a known celebrity show up in these when they were just getting their start. It's really kind of fun to see where they've gone from that point.
Right. No, absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah.
So that tees up another movie. And this next one's a classic. I think everybody has seen the first one. I don't know how the next one did on the box office, but now we're talking about Talking Babies. You guessed it. Look Who's Talking Now, the sequel to Look Who's Talking.
Well, it's the sequel to Look Who's Talking 2.
Oh, you're right. It's the third one. You're right.
And by this point in time, we have Talking Dogs.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Good God.
This is the one that everyone kind of forgets about because the first one is like a $7 million movie that became a smash hit, making almost like $300 million worldwide. And then the second one
Right.
did like 125 million, and then the third one did $10 million at the box office.
I was
And
waiting for you. I was waiting real quick. Inside Tony story. We have this joke that it's Austin Powers' fault, but we have done this for years. Anytime something is about to be really negative and shocking, we've always done this. Nah, nah, nah. So I was kind of waiting.
I was gonna do it. I was about to do it. I knew you could. I knew you could tell I was gonna do it, but I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, $10 million on the third one. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, a few years ago, I was kind of rehashing some stuff, and I kind of had forgotten this movie was even out.
Right.
I mean, it was because I was doing some box office stuff from the past and looking at some numbers and things. I was like, look who's talking now only did $10 million in the domestic box office. Like, what happened? I didn't even realize that number had happened, and I had been following box office for about 4 years at that point. So, kind of
Yeah.
funny, but I mean, yeah, it just didn't do very well. I mean, it was Talking Dogs, and we've talked about how comedies tend to have issues as they if they want to franchise them. You know, I mean, Austin Powers being the exception to that rule, of course,
And
but
Shrek. I think we figured out it was the Mike Myers phenomenon. Yeah.
Right, Myers phenomenon, right? Exactly. But yeah, I mean, Austin Powers obviously got kind of better with the second one. That doesn't always happen with some of these other comedies. So it's not. It's just different than action, you know, because comedies tend to rehash the same gags and stuff like that, which kind of get tiring, especially if you're trying to do a trilogy. So
Yeah. And it's
I think there's a
interesting
lot of
because
people who didn't see this movie.
what's that?
I said I think there's a lot of people who didn't see this movie.
Well, I'm definitely one of them because I thought it was the sequel. I didn't even remember. Who's in this? Do they keep Bruce Willis?
So yeah, I mean it's no they I mean it's Talking Dogs. So you got Danny DeVito and Diane Keaton doing the voices, and you got John Travolta and Kirstie Alley, of course. And,
That's who it was. That was the babies. Was that the baby voices?
no, Travolta and Kirstie are the actual.
Parents.
Yeah, there's actual. The babies are no longer babies anymore. They're they're like they're kids now, so they have voices. They're actual kids that can speak. So
If
it's
you think
different.
about how confusing,
I know.
if you
But it's
if
like, how
you're
can you miss? Dogs are universally popular, man. So how can this one miss Talking Dogs? There's no way that's got to be a hit. It was not a hit.
no, I just find it funny if you tried to explain this movie in English to a foreigner, they're gonna look at you like you're an insane person.
Put it in the time capsule. 50 years later, this thing comes out. You got talking Danny DeVito and Diane Keaton as dogs.
Yeah.
And no one ever believe that.
No, I don't know about that one going forward. But that then brings up, and we gotta state one of the things that we love to talk about on the show is windows of time. So yes, this is November, but November doesn't really start kicking off the bigger box office sort of traditions until later in the month, and you'll see that as reflected here. but we're still kind of like in this halfway point. We're in the early part of it where historically, and now this year, of course, Wicked's coming out. That well, I guess Wicked came out this week, so that's we record these ahead of time, so arguably my statement stands. But this is early November, so you're still in that kind of slow phase because then you get RoboCop 3, which I didn't even know why they made a RoboCop 2. I get it; it's an action movie franchise, but RoboCop 3 is somehow, if I'm not mistaken, rated PG-13. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of the. I mean, RoboCop 2 is pretty violent. I mean, if you remember that
Yeah.
one, I saw that one with Richard, but this one I see with my brother, and I think he's 7 years old. So at the time, he's not 7 years old now, but at the time he was 7 years old, and he loved to go. We saw it at Carmike. We saw it at the Carmike 10,
Yep.
and yeah, it was we had a blast. He loved it. It was kind of like his first real. I mean, he liked RoboCop and knew the character and everything, but this was his first real foray into going to see him in theaters, which he loved to see. Even though it's not Peter Weller this time around,
Right.
it's Robert Burke who takes on this character, and of course he's from Stephen King's Thinner as well. But Nancy Allen's back, and Jill Hennessy's in this one, Rip Torn, and it did okay. I mean, it wasn't as big as the first and second one. It was a $22 million movie that did 47 million worldwide. And of course with second tier marketplaces, it made a good profit. But I enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. My brother and I had a blast watching it, and it was fun to see him get to see RoboCop in the theater because I had actually seen all the RoboCop movies with somebody different every time. So
Right.
all the RoboCop
Right.
movies. The first one with my grandfather, the second one with Richard, and then this one with my brother. So kind of cool.
And I got to tell you, the reason I have a special place for this movie is it has a ninja in it. And this is when we're getting into the 90s ninja time frame. And RoboCop 3 has a cyber ninja, if I'm not mistaken, which is also probably why your brother loved it because he was a big Ninja Turtles fan. This is in the 90s where ninjas were just like the hottest thing ever. So they were just putting ninjas in random stuff. And this is one of those films, if I remember correctly. What's crazy about RoboCop is the first one is because it's Paul, whatever his name is, the guy that Paul Van Hoven, whatever the guy is, Starship
Verhoeven.
Troopers.
Yeah, Paul
Verhoeven, thank you. And he's very good at making science fiction satires, and RoboCop is really like a satire. There's a nice like undertone of sci-fi statement. RoboCop 2 pushes that boundary a little bit further. They're all very graphic movies. And then you get to this one and it's way less graphic and it shifts. But also in the same time frame, they rolled out a RoboCop animated series. So then you end up with a RoboCop cartoon and kids wanting to see more source material would have to go back and watch one of the most violent rated R films ever in the original RoboCop. It's pretty graphic, dude. It's
yeah,
graphic.
it is. The first one and the second one. The second one's got the spot where he shoots out his eye and all that stuff. So I
Yeah. Oh
mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
that's that is pretty graphic. I mean, no doubt. It's a weird
So it's
movie
kind
though.
of,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say it is a weird. That's literally what I was about to say. It's like it's such a weird movie. I don't know where you're going with it. It's just a weird movie in the sense of like they made the shift towards kids on a
Right.
R-rated franchise.
I think they wanted to do that because they wanted to monopolize the marketing for the toys and stuff like that. Of course, it's got a video game. The RoboCop 3 came out as a video game as well.
Yep.
And that's part of what I was going to say was, this movie is kind of odd because it was filmed in 1991. It doesn't get released till late 1993, and the reason that happened was because it was supposed to be released in 1992, and then Orion Pictures went through bankruptcy, had to go through this whole thing, and by the time they had figured it out, this movie had already been because it was done. The movie was done, and Columbia TriStar Entertainment owned the international property to this movie.
No
And so what
way.
happened was they went ahead and released it in Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. So they released it in some of these international markets while it didn't get released here in the United States. And then what happened was by the time it starts getting by the time they push it back to this November date, 1983, there are already bootlegs rolling around New York City being sold on VHS,
Yep.
and of course, the video game makes it out before the movie, and it spoiled the plot for the movie.
Of
So it was
course.
kind of an odd scenario because usually they release the soundtracks, they release stuff like that, but they don't usually release the video games before because if it involves the plot, they don't want to ruin that.
Yeah, it's interesting too because just inside baseball for anybody that is interested in the film business beyond just making the movie, the back end of film is very complex. It is finance broker, stock market level complexities. And so each one of these territories is sold individually, is normally how it goes. They might do a group buy, but they're all sold individually. But the number one territory for a US film, US made film, is the United States. It's going to be your primary revenue generator. So it's just really odd that, and in fact, I don't think I've heard of that happening very often where they've dropped a movie in 3 foreign markets, because Japan's actually a decent sized market, 3 foreign markets prior to the release in the US. I mean, normally it's a simultaneous or it's delayed a week, comes out in the US, it's delayed behind it. Sometimes they'll release something like in China or some of the other bigger countries first, but it's usually right after. I think they did that with Avengers. They released it early. It was a money grab attempt. But that's pretty wild, dude. The fact that it got dropped first like that. That's kind of one of those weird, what a weird factoid on that movie to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if it comes out a little bit, like a week or so before, it never comes out a year before. You know,
Right.
this was almost a year before it came
Right.
out. That's very
Yeah.
odd. And like I said, it's set up for the ability to do all these bootlegs in New York. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. They'd never make that mistake now because piracy is so
Ah,
rampant. That would never
do not.
work. Next on deck, we jump forward to November 10th. And looks, I got to be honest with you. I remember this movie coming out. I remember Jonathan Green, one of our cast members on this show. Johnny Green wanted to see this movie so bad. I remember him talking about it a good bit. I didn't see it because I wasn't really into this style of movie at the time. As an adult, I've gone back and watched it. It's a fantastic film, and that's going to be Carlito's Way. What do you got on that movie? Because that's a, I feel like it's sometimes undermentioned movie when we start getting into that kind of crime genre sort of vibe.
Oh yeah, I mean it's Brian De Palma, so you get that great um, thriller and crime feel to it. He's really gritty in how he approaches that in his art form and his filmmaking. And of course, you got it. I mean, just a stellar cast, man. I mean, Al Pacino, and he was really big here in the '90s with a lot of different movies, and obviously be big before that, but obviously he's still really big in this time frame. And Sean Penn, who's I think, kind of in his prime at this point as being
Agreed.
one of the best. And Penelope Ann Miller is terrific in this movie as well. Yeah, and it did pretty well. I mean, it was like a $30 million film, but did like 65 worldwide. But I mean, it's such a great crime thriller. I have it's a gritty film, and I really like the style of it.
I do too. And it's been a while since I've watched it. I just remember it's on my list of like, hey, this is if someone asks me about crime movies, Carlito's Way normally enters that conversation somewhere in there. But it's also just got this sort of, as you said, it's gritty, but even visually,
Oh
it's
yeah.
got this. They from a technical standpoint, and for those that you don't know, while Tony, his background is creative, he's also an AD. He manages a lot. I come from the cinematography side. I'm not a cinematographer. I'm a director of photography. Big difference there. But that alone, like just the way it's shot, they forcibly make it look grainier. They forcibly did things to give it this grit and this vibe, and it is hands down. I don't remember who shot it, but it's hands down one of the most interestingly shot films of this timeline because they definitely reverted back in some cases. I'd argue it even had some of that old '70s style cinema verite vibe to it, but it's a great movie. Um, it's powerful. It's a powerfully good movie. So it's fun if you've not seen it.
It's shot by Stephen Burrow, who
Okay,
did
there we go. Yep.
yeah, second unit on like Apocalypse Now and stuff like that. So
Yep.
he's got Black Stallion and stuff. So I mean, he's really a pretty big name. But yeah, so I mean, they got one of the better cinematographers to shoot the film.
Yeah, and what I mean by that is the grain and stuff. Knowing it's very hard to, we don't think about it now because people just add grain digitally or they're trying to have a clean image, but to purposely do this means that they shot underexposed and they pushed they did a lot of risky stuff, and because you got to think about film, the exposure is the exposure. You can't really change that much in post production, if you will, editing. And so the fact that they took a risk on this, it's very good. Again, great movie, super solid film. Sometimes I listen to a lot of score soundtracks, and like I have a station I listen to, and sometimes the music from Carlitos shows up in there because it was also very, very good. Great movie to watch. If you haven't seen it, I'd suggest it for sure.
There's something about crime thrillers set in the Bronx and New York that just really romanticizes it. You know, when you're watching it, you're just kind of, man, it's gritty. It's in New York. I mean, like that. I know it's kind of stereotypical, but also kind of fun to watch. You know, I mean, they especially when you're still back in that era where New York was kind of it hadn't been kind of cleaned up yet. All
Yep.
when they're making these movies, so it's really still a pretty downtrodden place in a lot of areas.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good classic New York. If you grew up in this time frame, this is classic New York, right?
Yeah,
Or the semblance of it. So
stuff like that. So it's kind of I saw all that in person for many years. You know, I was growing up there, and so it was. You know, when I see it in movies, I'm like, yeah, that's New York. Like, you
yeah,
know, you may not want to walk the streets, but it's kind of cool to watch it in on TV.
yeah, no, for sure, 100% that. So rolling into the 12th. So this came out on a Wednesday. Is that what this is? November 10th was a Wednesday, and then we had a Friday release. Is that what's happened here? Because November 12th has a 3 stack right behind it.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, interesting move. They must have believed a lot in that movie to give it a solo release date. Interesting.
Yeah.
We step in November 12th, and we're gonna have three very different movies. Three very different movies. And it starts with, and listen, I don't know how fast they're turning out these Ernest movies, but I feel like we've talked about Ernest several times in the past couple of episodes. So they're just churning and burning Ernest movies like crazy. So we've got Ernest Rides Again right here. Here we go.
Well, we had Jim Varney last episode in the Beverly Hillbillies.
That's right.
So I mean he's popping up in other stuff besides Ernest as well. At this point, he's pretty popular
That's right.
in this era. So yeah, this is one of his movies. Ernest Rides Again is kind of like one of his movies that didn't do all that well. It was, I mean, he didn't shoot it for a lot. It was like a 3 million. They kept him pretty low budget, but I mean, it didn't do great. It did like half of that, even 1.5 million. So it got kind of lost in the shuffle with all these other big movies that were kind of coming out at the time. Yeah, I mean, it's not his best of the films by any
No,
means. It's not Ernest Goes to Camp or neither. You know, it's kind of the fun ones, or you know, but. Or Ernest Goes to School, which is the next one. But yeah, I mean, it's I always liked the Ernest movies. I have kind of a soft spot for him. You
same,
know, come
same.
on, man. Jim Varney was
Yeah,
kind of a fun guy, and he was, I mean, his shtick could get a little bit grating at times. I'm sure to if you watched it enough. But I mean, between the commercials and the movies, my brother liked going to see him as well. So that was kind of another reason I liked him as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a little movie. You know, it got kind of buried at the box office. And it's not a top pick type thing, but definitely a fun little hour and a half.
yeah. Look, all of them. I've yet to show them to my girls because I'm curious to see if A, they'll even care, and B, if they hold up enough to keep their attention, because they are very specific movies about a very specific thing, and we all kind of grew with it. So you and I grew with the Ernest character,
Right.
starting
Well,
out in
it
local
is.
TV commercials all the way up. So it's just fascinating that you took a local TV ad and turned them into a freaking franchise. Is ridiculous.
But it's funny because they kind of discover like a long lost Revolutionary War canon. So there's kind of like a history thing to this one as
Yep.
well. So
Yep.
I mean, like a history plot to it. So it's kind of fun. I mean, but I mean, yeah, it would be interesting to see if your girls would even want to watch them because I mean, we grew up with this character. You know,
Right.
he was around and we saw him on TV, and it was something we saw in our pop culture, and they wouldn't even know who he is. I mean, if you showed him for the first time, you have to explain what this character is.
Well, I think I've talked about it before. I loved the Apple Dumpling Gang as a kid. I think they were hilarious. and I did show it to my girls, and they liked it. They laughed some, but not as funny as it was to me. Like I thought that was the greatest comedy ever, but to them it was a little bit different. All right,
Right.
so we finish up the Ernest side of things. We say goodbye just for a short time to Jim Varney. God rest him for actually passing away. But in our current state of time travel, we are saying goodbye to him for a moment, and we get into a movie called My Life. Now, I don't know this one. I really don't. And so you're going to have to tee this up because all I think about is my so-called life, and that is not accurate. We're not there yet in time.
No, definitely not. This is Michael Keaton and Nicole Kidman, and
Oh,
yeah, it's a really good movie. I actually saw this twice in theaters. I saw it at Carmike 10, and I saw it at the Dollar Theater as well. Um, but this is a tough movie to get through.
wait, is this the one where he records himself
Yes,
and oh my God, is it brutal? Dude, I have goosebumps from the
it's
brutality of that movie.
it's really good. It's a really good movie. I mean, I've seen it quite a few times over the years, but it's a great film. It's got a lot of heart to it, and but it is very emotional. And basically, what's happening is he's recording his life because he's a terminal patient, and he's recording his life so that his son will even know who he is because she's pregnant with their child. So he's recording all the stuff and trying to teach lessons through his recordings to his child. And yeah, it's a pretty intense movie. I mean, it did pretty well, but yeah, you know, it is a tough movie to get through in spots.
Well, it's tough because like going back and watching it now, we know the outcome. It's one of those movies where, man, you've got to, and again, credit to Michael Keaton's ability. You already know the ending of this movie, and yet you stay
Yeah,
glued to it because you want to see what he does. And
right.
I think it's good writing, it's good filmmaking, but it's also a testament to Michael Keaton's ability to command a performance because that's what you're after. Nicole Kidman is perfect in this as well, but like I haven't thought about this movie in a long time. I actually have, but I haven't put the name My Life to it. I always just remember that movie existing. But it's arguably what I've told you. We just said this right before we recorded the show. We'll tell a story later. We'll tee it up. We'll tell a story later that may be a little controversial to my family members to hear to some extent. I'll catch some ship for it. But like it's still, I told Tony, it's still our history. So the fact that we're recording this is as if something happens to me or my kids want to go back and see me or see their Uncle Tony, they have a chance to experience us telling from 1993 on. As long as we have the show going, we're telling our lives. We're opening it up. We're literally doing it. So it is in an odd way, very relevant to this podcast that movie comes out in the window that we're talking about.
No, absolutely, and it's kind of he's got all these really profound points in that movie as well. I mean, he's basically showing him how to do all kinds of stuff, like how to cook as a college student and things like that. Like, it's a
Right.
pretty entertaining. I mean, Keaton's a great actor. I mean, I think people kind of he's done a lot more dramatic stuff as his career has unfolded, of course. But back in the '80s, he was mostly known as a comedic actor, outside of maybe the movie Clean and Sober. And then he gets into being obviously Batman for a couple movies, and he's known for that. And then he gets into these very drama uh, filled roles. Kind of, I wouldn't say they get kind of lost, but I mean, some of these movies. If this movie did really well at the box office, did like 54 million on a $15 million budget, so it did well. But I feel like some of those get lost when he's known for like Batman or Mr. Mom or Night Shift, as I love my favorite movie by him. But but yeah, I mean, My Life is a great film. One Good Cop is a great film, and those were kind of the movies he released in the early '90s that were kind of had a lot more serious tone to them.
Yeah, they're heavy. They're both heavy movies with again, near flawless acting, solid performances, but heavy movies. And the interesting thing about Keaton in those roles is because he has he has tremendous comedic timing. He adds brevity when it needs to be there. So you'll have this dense idea and he can add a little brevity to that, which I think is really, again, what I was saying earlier, a testament to the guy's ability to smash it.
For sure.
So next we get into this is the Disney version
It
of the
is.
Three Musketeers. And I got to tell you, I loved this movie. Because I don't remember if I loved it when we were kids, but I loved it growing up later because I remember having to read those books and go through all that. And I really enjoyed it. And later on in life, there's a Three Musketeers that comes out with Mila Jovovich, I think, is in it.
Mhm.
But I always hearkened it back to this one, and I always had the fond memory of seeing this movie. I may have seen this movie with Wade if I didn't see it with you, but I very much remember this movie being something I enjoyed, or at least I have some kind of fond memory for.
Yeah. Well, you did see it with Wade, and you did see it with me because you and Wade, you and Wade end up with me, my mother, and my father and my brother at the theater.
Did we
So we
get big sandwiches?
we got we got sandwiches and everything. We got
Yes.
sandwiches and the the chocolate covered peanuts
You
and the
son of a gun.
boxes and everything
Yeah. These
else.
are all callbacks, folks. If you don't know these stories, you got to go back and listen to the episodes. I don't remember which one. It's somewhere in the back catalog, but we tell you all about the sandwiches, the importance of them, and the stupid chocolate covered peanuts. It's really just a box. What a son of a gun. That's see. I knew I saw this movie, and I remember Wade really liking it. So Wade, we've talked about him briefly. Wade's my cousin, raised more like my little brother. His mom is still alive at this point, but his mom eventually, in 6 years, passes away. And so, but I was very close. Their dad was not a great guy, so he had left them. So they got raised like brother and sister. He has an older sister, so I'm the middle child in this weird trifecta. But Wade was like the little brother that followed me and Tony around because he's older than Jeff, Tony's brother,
Right.
but he's still younger. He's 3 years younger, 4 years younger than Tony, and then 2 years younger than me. And so we all had this kind of, that high school age. It's hard to you don't really want to hang out with little kids, but Wade was cool and we let him hang with us, I guess, a lot.
Oh yeah, and this is such a great movie. I mean, I loved this cast, especially then. And I had a poster. I don't know if you remember it, but I had a poster for this movie hanging in my room at the time, like one of those ones you get, those little smaller ones that you get.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, Chris O'Donnell, Oliver Platt, Tim Curry, Rebecca De Mornay. I mean, it was a cool cast, and I was a huge fan of all those guys. Like I loved
Oh
Kiefer
yeah.
Sutherland, Charlie Sheen, and I worked with Tim Curry years later, and just like I worked with Michael Keaton. I didn't mention that in the last one, but I worked with both those guys, and yeah, I mean, this was a cool cast, man. I loved this version of the Three Musketeers and thought it was a lot of fun.
It's actually still my favorite to this day is that when the kids have to read it, when Finley gets there, I'll have to let her read. I'll let her watch this after she reads it. But it's so snarky and fun and witty that it's just an enjoyable movie. In fact, I'd argue that if you were to go back and watch this, pay attention to the tone of this film because it's really going to kind of pave the way for how Marvel does the Avengers movies and stuff like that going forward with that level of snark and sarcasm. This did it first, right? So again,
Absolutely.
another great example of history does repeat itself down the line, or we learn from what we do well. So interesting show for sure.
And Oliver Platt's so great at that.
Yeah, he's so good.
Which you're talking about right there with the snark and everything. Oliver Platt is a pro at that. Like that's his acting style. He's so good at between that and like flatliners and stuff like that. You go back and watch '90s Oliver Platt, you're gonna have a lot of fun.
Well, what's funny is you get little tastes of him now in The Bear. You get a little taste of that from time to time when he shows up and he does some of the stuff he does in there is very him, and it's good to see him in those roles again. But yes, '90s Oliver Platt is king sarcastic for sure.
And this movie did well. It was like they released it as a $30 million Disney Three Musketeers film, and it did about 111 million worldwide. So pretty stout.
That's a big boy movie. But we're also starting to get into that holiday weekend time because this is the 12th. So we're, like I said, about halfway through the month is when you start seeing that shift occur to go through that process. All right. So you had something teed up here. I'm going to let you tee this up. And by the way, Tony, you're so accurate on your timing. It's a little disgusting. I'm going to let you tee. That's just an inside baseball note. I just wanted to do it in real time. But go ahead and tee this up. Set it up because we gotta bring some music into the show. That's part of our process. So
So I mean, we were all big music fans, obviously, at this time, and one of the bands that we loved was a band called Primus, and obviously with Les Claypool on bass and lead singing, and we were all big Primus fans at the time. I think this was right around the time of Pork Soda,
Yep.
uh, and so they were playing in Pensacola, and I had just at this point I had just turned 17, and it really was the only one that would have any authority to drive this distance because we were about an hour away from Pensacola. And so we all decided we wanted to go see Primus. And I'm pretty sure, and you would know more about it than me, but I'm pretty sure the only reason you even got to go to this concert was because I was going and driving.
100%. I will
Um,
confirm that when my mom listens to this episode. She will confirm it, but I am 90% sure it is because of you. It's certainly not Jonathan Green and Devin because they were never on my mom's top 10 list. I will tell you that much. Nothing, no offense, boys, but you guys, you know what you did. So
they, they know what they did. So yeah, I mean, it was so yeah, we wanted to go see this concert, and we begged and begged and begged to go, and and finally, everyone agreed. It was perfectly fine for us to go. I had to drive. I had to be kind of in charge of the whole excursion. Yeah, which is fine, except here's what happened. So we got so we get the tickets, which we got at the there's a place in the mall at this time in Bel Air Mall where you can go buy tickets and also get computer games and stuff. But we bought the tickets there at that Babbage's down the
is that
way.
where we got was a Babbage's?
Yes,
So it's so weird that Babbage's was a Ticketmaster because I'm sure they were Ticketmaster at this point.
right. Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we go buy these tickets. I'm sure I mean, they were
it
probably
was
cheap
weird.
but expensive to us. I'm sure.
The Ticketmasters were really kind of an odd thing because I don't think people realize that. And of course, it's different now than it ever used to be. But there used to be random places that you could go to that would be a Ticketmaster, and you'd have to figure out where these places were, and they'd be in all kinds of places. Like I mean, I'm up here in St. Louis, and I remember going into a I used to buy tickets at like a sports apparel shop. They were like a ticket master, a local ticket master. And so you'd go in these places that you maybe weren't shopping in just to buy tickets to concerts and random places. And it was kind of an odd time, but I mean, kind of fun too, because we'd end up at, going there and looking at computer games and stuff like that. We were all big gamers and stuff. So we would go in there and look around and then buy some concert tickets. And so that's what we
Oh yeah.
did. We bought tickets to this concert, and I drove. We were, you and I were obviously living across the street from each other, so we loaded up into the big gold Fifth Avenue, the big Chrysler Fifth Avenue, the big boat that I was driving at the time, because I was still driving that car at this time, and and we went on our way. First of all, we went to go pick up Jonathan Green, and Jonathan Green was running a little bit late. Now, I don't care what he says. The man was running late. Okay, and it plays a part in the story because we're gonna miss something at the start of this concert, and it's because of him.
Yep.
I don't care what anyone says. It's kind of a mixed bag because we something happens later on, but he is running late, so he does run us like 15 minutes late trying to get ready. So that's the start. That's how we start off not leaving Mobile right on time. And then we go pick up Devin. He's on time. He's sitting like on the front stoop of his house, ready to go. He just jumps right on in the car. And then we go on to our excursion to find Pensacola. And I say find Pensacola because we kind of know how to get to Pensacola, but this is not, you know, loaded up into your GPS smartphone era. We don't even have MapQuest really at this time. What we have is some people telling us how to get places.
Yep.
And we're going to the Bayfront Auditorium. Now it's 2024. I've lived in Pensacola for 5 years now. So I know that so now I know that everything literally was on one street.
Yep.
But at the
Yeah.
time, I had no idea that Palafox was, where everything was. And I'd only been to Pensacola, here and there and stuff like that, but with my parents, and you're probably the same way. But
Same.
started on this excursion to go over there. Now, I'm not a smoker, and Drew's not a smoker, but Devin and Johnny Green were at this point in time. So we had to stop multiple times,
I
not one time,
forgot.
but
I
twice.
forgot. Yeah.
So these guys could have a cigarette on the way to this concert because I wasn't about to let them do it in the car. And so we had to stop so they could have cigarettes at various places along the way, and so we did that as well. And then by the time we get to Pensacola, we're kind of lost.
Oh
Just
yeah.
for, we just don't. We know where we got to Pensacola. We know where that is. Okay, but we didn't really know where the Bayfront Auditorium was, which is kind of like on the very end of Palafox. We had no idea where that was. We had never been there. So it was, and it's our first. I mean, I've been to concerts at this point, but I've always gone to concerts with people. I had never really I've never driven myself to one at this point,
Yep.
and nobody in the car had ever driven to a concert.
This is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, aside from like some, Christian concert that my mom took me to, this is my very first concert, by the way. This is the very first concert I ever went to. Yeah.
First, right? And so we go to, we're lost. I mean, I'm lost, and I'm like asking around, and we finally get some directions to get out of the Bayfront Auditorium. We get there, and and we would have been on time if we hadn't been held up with all the little things that we had to do along the way,
Right.
including Johnny being late. But the first band that was opening for Primus was a band called the Melvins, who are obviously
Yep.
the godfathers of grunge. I mean, everyone knows them. Who knows this era of music? The Melvins are huge, and Johnny really wanted to see them
Yep.
bad. And I was like, we get up, we finally park, we finally go, we finally get in, we finally start walking in, and the Melvins literally are playing the last 30 seconds of Honey Bucket.
Which is their greatest song ever, by the way. There was
This
an,
is probably their
yeah.
greatest.
Yeah.
And that's it. We hear it as we're walking in. And that's the end of the Melvins.
Oh yeah.
So we get in
Yeah.
there time for the intermission and then the setup for Primus, which, was amazing.
Yeah. Primus puts on one of the best, especially back then. Again, that was my first concert, but I've seen Primus multiple times. Not so much in the later career, but throughout this era, all the way through the Pork Soda, whatever the next two albums were. I was still really into them for a long time. I still like them, but I mean, I was actively pursuing them, going to see them live. But this particular album, my God, Pork Soda, and the song, if you don't know it, the song off this album that was really big is My Name is Mud. And seeing Les Claypool, and we were close because Johnny and them wanted to be in the pit. Tony and I had pushed up to the front. I remember being closer and enough to see Les Claypool. I also remember what I purchased because it was my first concert. I had to buy swag. I think I bought a shirt and I bought this little Pork Soda medallion. It was a little necklacey medallion. And I wore this. I went to a private school where you weren't allowed to have that. I wore it under my shirt. I was so proud of this little stupid pork. I might still have it somewhere buried in the tchotchke box, but I remember those portions of it. But it was really it was my first concert, and then of the same event. I don't know if I was just caught up in the moment. Call it peer pressure, call it whatever you want. I wasn't directly pressured, but as Tony will tell you, I made probably one of the worst mistakes of my life. And I'm a no regrets kind of guy, but I'll be honest with you, it was probably not one of the best things I've ever done. I don't remember it in detail as Tony does, so I'm going to let him share that only because he has a friend's perspective on this. But you'll hear it is the stupidest thing I've ever done.
So we have this great concert. I mean, and Primus puts on a wonderful show, and they're absolutely incredible. And Jerry was a race car driver, and obviously, if you've ever seen the pit for that particular song, it's pretty wild. So we had a blast at the Bayfront Auditorium, and it was so much fun. Even with all those guys, we had a great time together. Load up in the car, start heading home. We're all kind of thirsty and stuff, sweaty, thirsty, and need something to drink. So we stop at a gas station along the way, and of course, those guys want to go out and smoke again. So they're out there. We're all standing. We got drinks and stuff and sodas and things like that, and we're all standing by the car at this point, all four of us. And they're kind of those two are kind of like you and I are kind of standing towards the driver's side door, and they're kind of like towards the back end of the car. It's a big car, so they're it's, several feet away. And
Right.
so and so and so you say to me, and to my stunned, and you're a couple of years younger than me, so you're about 15 at this point,
Right.
and so you say to me, you go, you know what I think I'm going to start doing, Tony? I go, no, what's up, man? He goes, I think I'm going to start smoking, and I'm like, you're going to start smoking? I was like, that's gross, man. Like, don't do that. Like, why would you start that? I go, once you start that, you're never going to stop. You'll never stop. It's going to, you'll just keep doing it. And I was like, you don't want to be like these guys have had to stop and smoke 4 times. Like don't do that. Like, it's disgusting. Then you said to me, and this is the dumb part of it, because that's not even the stupid part. The stupid part's getting ready to come up. The stupid part is when you push back on me and say, "Well, I'm not going to do it very often. I'll just do it every once in a while."
Yep.
And
Yep.
like I was like, I'm pretty certain that's not the way this works. I was like, I've never done it. I don't do it. I don't plan on smoking, and I'm still a lifelong non-smoker. But I was like, but I said I don't plan on doing it. But I said I don't think that's the way it works. I said once you start smoking with these guys, you're gonna become addicted like these guys. I was like, look at them,
Right.
dude, they're addicted. And it was kind of one of those things where we're in this movie where you're kind of looking over and the camera will pan over to these guys and they're just puffing away. And I don't know what you couldn't see about it, but you didn't see it then clearly as a 15-year-old. You kind of just saw it as like, hey, my friends are kind of doing it. It's kind of a cool
Yep.
thing. We hang out and do and smoke. I was like, all right, whatever you want to do, man. I said, but it is your life, so you got to do it. You got to do what you got to do. But I said, I don't support the decision, and I still don't support the decision as a 48-year-old man.
Right. And again, I say it with regrets because uh, nicotine and I are we're if you ever watch Parks and Rec, nicotine is my Tammy. Like anytime he just got to choke. But it's true. Like it comes into my life and it disrupts it for a few weeks and then I get rid of it and then it comes back. I have struggled with a nicotine addiction my entire life based on that exact moment. If I think through it, I think if because I am who I am, if I imagine I probably want to do it, not necessarily directly from seeing those guys do it,
Right.
but two things. One, I didn't grow up around any smoke. I mean, my grandparents smoked, but I didn't see that as smoking for some reason. I didn't have anybody around, so I didn't really understand it. My grandparents were old and smoking, and they're still alive. So to me, there's no causality there yet, right? They were
Right.
old in the sense they were probably in their 50s, 60s, whatever. But then I look at the I think because I was always obsessed with growing up. Like I always wanted to grow up. I was kind of rushing through childhood. It was always just something that I did, and I think that was the next level. That's gonna make me more masculine or more grown up or whatever. What an idiot! What a stupid idea to say. I'll be fine. No, 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 no. I'm not. I'm not fine. I still struggle with it daily. But it is a terrible thing. But that came from the first concert ever, which is, that changed the course of history for me because that love of music and seeing it live made me start to understand performance. And that, of course, I've told some of the story about Helmet before. Tony has too, but that changed the course of my entire life going forward. As I never thought about being a filmmaker as much as being a performer, and that's kind of triggers that whole series. So it works out in the end, somewhat.
No, it does. I mean, it was still a great night. It was still a
Yeah.
lot of fun, and of course, we made it home safely. So that everything ended up with a happy ending. But I mean, yeah, it's fun. It's dumb kid stuff. I mean, like
Yeah.
I really didn't feel like a lot of people talk about it. I never really felt a lot of peer pressure, anything like that growing up. It just didn't. I mean, nobody really put pressure on me to do anything that I didn't want to
Yeah.
do.
Same.
I mean, I don't feel like we really had that so much. I mean,
Mm-mm.
this was. I don't. Nobody was pressuring you to do anything. Like you literally came up with that bright idea on your own. You know. I mean, it was like out of nowhere, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
it was hilarious. I mean, it was the most. It's like you had thought about it for a long time and just were coming out right then. It's like
Yeah.
it was one of those like epiphany moments, and I mean, you really did put some thought into it. I thought it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a great idea, but it was. But you thought about it, so I'm proud of you.
It is one of those things though. I think through it and it's like, it is pretty amazing, especially if you hear it on the show. It's interesting to see, never direct peer pressure by any means, but like Tony and I fall in love with So Mary Axe Murder, and then our peer group like So Mary Axe Murder. And it is really fascinating when you're a young person, talk about being impressionable. It's there. And so sometimes there's leaders, like Tony and I led a lot of things. Like we were ahead of people in terms of finding certain things. Other people are ahead in other categories, whatever, smoking or whatever it may be. But it was always like, even to music. And I think about this a lot. Like we would be trading bands back and forth so much. Like it was a race to see who could find the next big band that everybody was going to love. Right. And it was just one of those things. And Primus was one of those bands that you and I both were deeply in love with early on. And to fairness for Jonathan, the Melvins, that's my first exposure to the Melvins. And then all of a sudden we're huge Melvins fans. So same thing. It's just interesting that like you are young. It's just fascinating how much the people around you end up influencing you to become the person you end up becoming. It's pretty interesting concept.
What's kind of cool about this particular show um, is that nowadays we have so many references that we can go back and look at past concerts and things like that
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. It's kind of remarkable what technology has brought us, especially with the internet. But if I don't have a ticket stub for this show, we don't actually know when this show is. Because I'll tell you right now, I can find almost every other show for Primus and the Melvins in the 1993 era, but this show in Pensacola is not listed
Crazy.
anywhere. It's like it never happened. I mean, I can find like articles in Pensacola that talk about because we will go, and it'll be for an episode later on. We will go to another Primus show in Pensacola when they're with the Meat Puppets, and it'll be at the Pensacola Civic Center, which is a different
Yep.
place,
Yep.
a much bigger venue. But we'll go to that later, and because that show happens, they will talk indirectly about this show, but they never actually name the dates or anything like that. So
Crazy.
I kind of had to put it all together and piece it all together out of my brain. And the fact that I do have a ticket stub for, which I don't have it on me right now, but is in my archives. But yeah, I mean it's wild that you can't find this show anywhere.
Yeah, it is kind of strange. And what's crazy now is the Bayfront's gone. Like it's gone.
Well, it's been gone for a long time, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
you see some good bands there though. I
we
mean,
do.
because that's also, and we'll talk about some later, but we see a great Presidents of the United States concert
Oh,
there.
that's one of the best stories. I've probably told that story 1,000 times because that's when live music's amazing. And we'll tell the story later on, but that's one of those great ones. I saw Helmet there. The very first time I ever saw Helmet was there. They opened for Nine Inch Nails. I didn't even stay for Nine Inch Nails that much. I
I
don't know if I can tell the full story on that one. Yeah, I can't tell the full
didn't, I
story
didn't
on that one.
I didn't go to that show,
Yeah,
but
that one's gonna get censored for security reasons. Anyway, so again, great times, great locations, great moments. That's all in the mix. So that's November or portion of November 1993. Because this is Christmas Day and you're hearing this episode drop on Christmas Day. So if you're listening to this afterwards, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you. I'm sure Tony will say the same. But what we wanted to do, Tony had a great idea. We wanted to come up with some Christmas picks. We're going to throw 3 movies each out at you. We'll rotate in turns here. Tony, you get to go first. What is your first Christmas pick movie in case somebody needs to watch something to escape their family on the holidays or bring them all together? Either way.
Well, I'm going to go with some stuff that people may not have seen because I know Christmas Story is obviously my favorite. I have 5 or 6 different versions of that leg lamp. I have the bunny suit. Like I love that movie. It's one of my all time favorites. Okay, so but it's on 24 hours for a reason. I mean, like everyone knows it. Christmas Vacation. Everyone's seen it. Elf. You know those movies. You know the ones. You know the list. It's a Wonderful Life. All those. Everyone knows those. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about those because they're classics for a reason. Everyone loves them. Yeah. So I'm going to go with a few that are kind of different, that maybe people don't see or can be newer classics. So I'm going to start out with a movie that came out a few years ago called Last Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know it, but sounds good.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful movie. And yeah, I had seen this in theaters, and of course, it is based off of the Wham song "Last Christmas," which is kind of a hit for George Michael and Wham. I'm sure you know the. I'm sure everyone
Oh,
knows the
yes.
song, of course. But it's got. It came out in 2019, and Paul Feig directed it, who
Yep.
directed Bridesmaids, and it's got Amelia Clark and Henry Golding and Michelle Yeoh, and it's a really cool movie. But bring a box of tissues because it's one of those films. I don't really going to go too deep into the plot because there's a lot there, and I will spoil something that happens in the movie. So I'm gonna leave it there. But that's one of my picks.
All right, so my number one pick is a classic. I can't deny it. I am a believer that this is a Christmas movie. I happen to only watch it at Christmas time, and I watch it every year, and that would be Die Hard, because the original Die Hard is one of the great. First off, people don't understand because we've had too many movies like it. Die Hard invented a genre, multiple genres can be attributed back to that movie. The first Die Hard is a again, that movie doesn't happen without Christmas, so it has to be a Christmas movie. So the original Die Hard is my first pick. I'm not going to tell you the plot. If you've never seen Die Hard, my lord, you're in big trouble. All right, so there's my number one. Number two for you, Mr. Tony.
So I'm gonna go with a movie that came out a couple of years ago that I saw in theaters with my mom, here in St. Louis, and it is a movie called Violent Night
Oh, dude, that's such a good movie.
with David Harbour, and he's classically smart ass in this, and it's such a great film. It's got wonderful dialogue. It has a really really fun story, and he's just this curmudgeon Santa Claus character that has to go and kind of save the day at this house that's being robbed. It's a pretty fun movie. It is violent. It is violent. It's called Violent Night. It is a violent film, but man, is it fun.
It is so fun. It's a great movie, a great companion to Die Hard or alternate to Die Hard if you need something to offset it. My next one is Christmas with the Cranks.
It's a good one.
And I love this movie. And the reason why I love it is because the older I get, the more I relate to the movie. At first, I didn't really, I enjoyed it. It was funny. But the older I get, the more, for some reason, it just really connects with me. I don't know what it is about it aside from I love Jamie Lee Curtis in it, Tim Allen. Good, 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 just straight up family movie. But as I moved away, and then me and my wife moved away, and we would have to come home every Christmas. It just really plays into a lot of personal stuff. But I feel like it's a great family movie. It's very funny. Uh, yeah, it's one of my favorites.
I'm gonna go with another kind of offbeat film that I just absolutely adore, and it's the 2015 movie Krampus.
Wow,
Uh,
you are going into some good crazy stuff. Yeah,
yeah, it's crazy, right? So I mean, they're definitely different films. It's got more of a horror element to it, but
yep.
such a fun movie. Again, lots of great dialogue, lots of humor. It's really kind of a fun story. Adam Scott, Tony Collette, Dave Keckner, who I've done a few movies with. He's a wonderful guy, but such a great movie, and definitely need to watch that one.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to throw out my last one is back to my kids. My kids absolutely adore the Santa Claus movies, but specific the Santa Claus, if you will,
Right.
the Tim Allen vehicle. But my kids really, and I enjoy it as well because Martin Short's in it, like the Santa Claus 3
Yeah.
because you get Jack Frost. And it has become a thing that it is shown in our house more than the other ones. That one is almost always on. Sterling watches it. My youngest watches it all the time. Finley, we all watch it because we all just love Martin Short in that movie. Absolutely enjoy it. I just wanted to throw one other note out there. You said this and it sparked something. If I'm not mistaken, is not the director of A Christmas Story also the director of Black Christmas, the horror film?
It
Isn't that
is.
accurate?
That's correct. Not only is that correct, but he also directed Porky's as well.
What?
Well, it's important to remember that something about A Christmas Story. It's not originally a PG movie. It was written as an R-rated film that was going to star Jack Nicholson.
No way.
It was. That's the what it was originally supposed to be. It was supposed to be and if you go, I've okay. See, this I'm a big fan of this movie to the point where I've been to Cleveland 3 times just to go to this house. I've
Right.
gone on tour 3 times. I've been to the house 3 times. I've taken all the crazy tours and gone to the shops and all the fun stuff. So when you're on the tour, they go into better detail about that film, and
Awesome.
they love to talk about is the fact that it was originally written as an R-rated movie with bad language, and that's why they wanted Jack Nicholson, and of course he turned it down, and then they changed the whole structure of the script.
How crazy is that? It has become one of like it is the movie that started the 24-hour movie marathon on Christmas Day because it's so safe and so family for and so relatable from any age bracket. And yet it was supposed to be a rated R comedy with Jack Nicholson. That's amazing. That's the power. That's the fun of filmmaking, really. Like that's the fun of it. Like nothing's really there's no happenstance. It just when things go, you just figure it out and suddenly you get a better piece of art. I think that's the joy of filmmaking.
Yeah, a lot of fun, man, and I love that movie, and I love that director. Bob Clark was a great director.
Super fun.
Well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap up the show. So, Tony, I'm going to say on behalf of my family to your family and to our entire listening audience, again, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year whenever you're hearing this, or welcome to the new year if you're hearing this later on. Thank you much for listening, and I'll let you close the show, Mr. Tony.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Uh, may all your holiday wishes come true, and we love you all. And keep on listening.
Bye.
Peace.